Well, good morning, gentlemen. Appreciate y'all being there, and everybody else was able to be on with us. As we shall, let's place ourselves in God's presence and start with a little prayer. So, I'll share my screen and we'll get going here. We'll do the first reading from today. I thought it was appropriate on the very early disciples and what they did to be able to lead the way for us, and how much we have in common with them, and in the spirit of what they shared continue to hopefully inspire us in our work. Their Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. In those days, some Jews from Antioch and Iconium arrived and won over the crowds. They stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing that he was dead. But when the disciples gathered around him, he got up and entered the city. On the following day, he left with Barnabas for Derbe. After they had proclaimed the good news to that city and had made a considerable number of disciples, they returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch. They strengthened the spirits of the disciples and exhorted them to preserve in the faith, saying, "It is necessary for us to undergo many hardships to enter the kingdom of God." They appointed presbyters for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting commended them to the Lord in whom they had put their faith. Then they traveled through Pisidia and reached Pamphylia. After proclaiming the word at Perga, they went down to Italia. From there they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work they had now accomplished. And when they arrived, they called the church together and reported what God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. Then they spent no little time with the disciples. Lord, may this missionary call that you've placed within each of us to be able to work and serve the poor, know that the poor go to all ends of the earth, and that we continue to be able to faithfully give that time, the preaching, so that we may bring and connect the generous donors to the very work, no matter where it takes us, just like the disciples, by boat to the far reaches. May our voice be heard and connected truly to the very spirit of the gospel and to the hope that it provides us all. We ask this in your name. Amen. And Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. If you can't read that, if you can't read that reading today and not think like, I went on an airplane to LA, and then I went on I drove over to Baltimore, and then I took a bus. I slept in this rectory. I mean, there's no better sign that I feel of the true disciples that y'all embody in your ministry and work. I know that for some of y'all it gets tiring, but at least inside the reading you get some validation that it's ordained work and somebody's gone before you to do it. So I hope that brings some comfort in reading this, that y'all are really living out the true disciples call. So
before we get started, I just want to say there's a couple of new faces on the screen today. If they would just take 1 minute just to
let's do that. That sounds good. Some introductions here.
Father Bozeman is with us, who's newly with us. Let's see who else. I'm scrolling through my screen. Father Upson, Father Akatan.
Let's do that. Do we want to unmute and do a quick intro just so they can meet? Father Bozeman, you want to start? Would you mind?
Sure. I'm Father Anthony Michael Bozeman, SSJ, the academic dean of St. Joseph Seminary, Josephite priest, and I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have Father Bozeman. A little connection. He was stationed in New Orleans for a while, so we've gotten to know each other. What a great man. So thanks for being on, Father Bozeman. Okay, who else do we have?
We have Father Ibawa and we have Father Upson.
Oh, Father Upson.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself, Father Upson. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone from this zone. I'm Father I'm Father Victor Ibawa from Nigeria. I'm in Buffalo, so it's nice having the first meeting with you all. And I've been away for vacation for the past 3 months to attend to my old parents who are at home in Nigeria.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Yeah.
Father Timothy, you're muted, but go ahead and jump in.
Okay. Yeah, so I just came back from Ghana and transit to Florida on Thursday. And unfortunately, I just have a doctor's appointment for a small clot in my leg, which got swollen. But I will be with you all through till the doctor's the moment of meeting the doctor. But I just came back from Ghana after a funeral celebration of my junior brother and my senior brother, the first and the last. But anyway, the funeral went well. So I'm really, really happy to come and to be baptized and confirmed with a cross Catholic.
Glad to have you. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Corey.
Father Upson.
Hi, I'm Father Upson, Diocese of Rochester, New York. I am presently retired. I retired as of last June. Here I am. My mother passed in February, so I haven't been too much involved with Cross Catholic, but I'm back and hopefully functioning a little bit more at this time.
So glad to have you. Good seeing your face. All right. Anyone else?
That's it. Thank you so much. We're so happy to have all of our new outreach with us and logging on today. So thank you for that couple minutes, and we can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
That's fantastic. So glad to have some guys on. And in fact, I love that we were able to get a few of you talking at the first place, because that's really what makes these work. And I know it's a little bit of navigation of the mute button and not mute button, but really the beauty here is that we know that we can't necessarily travel and all be in the same physical location every single week or every single month, or even, once a year. It just doesn't happen with our schedules. But Cross being committed to being able to not only have us together, but then to be able to have conversations around like how does this balance out? How do we kind of refine the craft and be able to kind of jump into supporting each other in this work? Obviously, the reading was a great way to start, because if there's one thing that connects y'all, is y'all are some traveling fools. Y'all are fools for Christ in the way you travel. I mean, it's amazing the amount that y'all go out, and I think part of that obviously is brings us to be able to not only share each other's stories, but to be able to share this inside of the context each month that we're able to talk about this. And so I want to go back and make sure we are reminded, as I'm about to share my screen, wanted to remind us about a couple of things in our past. I like to always kind of peek back first to be able to look at the last webinar on impact. We didn't have a big number join us in person, but if you were able to watch that, and if you had any insight, now would be a good time to just kind of process that before we jump in. So if you had any thoughts, sometimes it's hard to manage the little button where you say raise hand. So if you can't do that, don't worry about it. But if you can, just unmute yourself and share if you had any insight that you thought was particularly impressive or intentional that you wanted to share with your brothers. Because I definitely think that was when we talked about impact, I thought there was some really good content there that allowed us to be able to see that the power of our preaching comes with the impact, especially when it comes kind of from the fundraising side, allowing people to be able to really feel that their dollar, their gift, their benevolence is at work in the people of God and the poor. So any thoughts, comments you want to add to that? Again, not that there's some quiet stuff. Father Bauer, go ahead.
All right. Sorry, I still don't understand this technology to get my picture up there, but
you're fine.
Maybe it's just as well I don't scare you.
Great.
Yeah, the last session, it just, I knew about impact, but I thought brought to the fore of utilizing that. And so I adapted my talk when I go through the brochure. I ask people if it's not on their check or whatever to write their address on so that we can thank you. But now I've added to that. And I said, some of you might like to know specifically what you're offering, what impact it made. And I said, if you will give us your name and address, then we can tell you exactly, what project or what country it went to, or if you have a special desire, write that on the brochure so we can honor that. And so that, I'm hoping that's making a good impact.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for putting your hand up. We did get to see it. Good. No, that's good. And it is a good reminder that inside of the world of the donor on the pew side, impact really helps drive to the next level. And it is, as we talked about in that call, that balance of not feeling like every gift is restricted. But that is why Cross does such a good job of being able to connect, gifts for water and gifts for certain projects that that individuals can be a part of, and how that is invited to them because of that impact. And so that's great. So thanks for that. Any other comments before we go? I can't necessarily, let me change my view here to make sure I see everybody. Oh, there we go. All right. Any other thoughts or comments before we jump in? All right. Okay, so let me share my screen. We'll go into, oh, it's already shared. There we go. So today's conversations are going to be around confidence and humility, the beautiful balance of making an ask. And I know some of you might say, well, what kind of commotion is this? As Father Jim said, smoke and mirrors. I love that he says, "How you doing?" "Oh, smoke and mirrors. I'm doing fine. It looks good." But in all seriousness, I think one of we talk about inside of the very nature of the preaching, the very nature of offering this gift to other folks, and being able to do this week in and week out comes really two tenets of especially on the fundraising side, when you're making an ask, of these two sides that we have to balance in making an ask. And really at the bottom of this is in the fundraising language, there's a word, or there's a saying that we have, is that nobody gives to the Titanic. Has anybody ever heard that? Maybe not. Nobody gives to the Titanic, which is if things feel like they're going down, if things feel like they're falling apart, nobody wants to invest in that. Nobody wants to be able to give their charitable dollars to that. And so being able to navigate both confidence and humility is a difficult balance, because if you come across egotistical, if you come across conceited, or if you come across that you just need something from them and you're not having anything to offer, without that balance of humility, it continues to be a challenge in that. And so in the fundraising side, there's the side of this that is obviously the preaching, and that's not what I'm talking about, but it really is when the shift, and I am referring to it in the fact that when you preach, but it's when you shift to the fundraising side that you need to be able to have this conversation of saying, what is it specifically that I'm being able to bring forward, and how do I do this with a way that is properly done, just so that I'm getting a gauge of this. And I think this is part of the reason why Ashton and the team, Sandy and the team, we wanted to be able to really wrestle with this idea of like continuing topics and looking to be able to feed you and doing that through the survey. But how many of you have ever thought of the balance of confidence and humility when it comes to your preaching, or specifically the ask, like really navigating those two and been intentional in that? And I say that, has that ever come up in this balance for you of what that is? And is that something that you would want to share? Because I think one of the things when we first chose this topic was like saying, well, is this something that's talked about a lot, especially on the fundraising side? It's talked a lot about in asking on the fundraising in the secular world and fundraising, asking kind of this balance of confidence and humility. But have you ever addressed this in your own kind of preaching and background? Feel free to share if you have, put your hand up, or kind of share a story if you've ever kind of navigated that balance. Any thoughts? You don't have to string me out there too long if I don't want to. So with that, I'll just kind of dive in, and I'll say this. One of the fears of fundraising is that you come across too confident, and especially for veterans that have been doing this a while, if you come across too confident, that it does create this challenge of being able to get inside of the donor's mind of like, how do you really stir their emotions if the confidence kind of is over exuded and about you and not about necessarily the story that we're telling, the story that we're weaving. But in the same side, in the humility piece, I think one of those things that comes in, if you just came in really too soft, and you did not give them a firm offer to be able to be a part of, a solid and bold vision to be able to be in a part of, the humility actually will work against you inside of sharing that ask, if you will, for individuals. And so being able to have that beautiful balance, I think is one of the keys, not only in certain things, but I wanted to be able to break that down. And really a key to today is going to be you sharing times. I'm going to be asking you to share times when you have kind of either come in too confident or come in too humble. If you're humble and making an ask, too humble and making an ask, you're not going to get a gift. But if you're overconfident, they're going to say, well, he's got everything he needs, and the poor don't need it. And so in saying that, I think one of the things that we'll do is break down each one, but ask you to share some stories of how you've navigated this in your preaching and how you continue to navigate it. So we're going to go over the confidence. We'll look, what does it look like in our preaching? We're going to go over kind of what that humility looks like in your preaching, specifically in making your ask inside your preaching, not in your reflecting on the gospel or the readings. Obviously, commanding the audience. What does that mean for you? Beggars for Christ. How does that kind of reflect in your behaviors? And then obviously the continuing of the refining of the craft. So that'll be the first thing. What does confidence look like in preaching? So I'm just going to go around. I'm going to try to get some feedback from you all. What does confidence look like in preaching? Before we open up, just go ahead and unmute yourself and say what you think that looks like. We'll kind of record that. What does confidence look like when you're preaching?
Corey, this is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
I'm having a problem understanding what you're saying. I'm hearing you say confidence has to do with the ask, and I'm hearing you saying that it's not connected with the preaching.
Sure.
I'm not sure what you're trying to get at, frankly.
Sure. What I wanted to get at was I try to stay in my lane without telling you how to preach when you're reflecting on the Gospels or the readings. That really would, even though it invades that and it deals with that, I just want to make sure that that's not where this is really specifically the part when you get to the ask part and talking about cross, how you talk about that with confidence and humility. So I guess to be clear, what I'm not wanting to do is to be able to get into like how you preach how you preach on the gospel and the readings. This is really about the cross section of your homily. Does that make sense, Bob?
It's clearer, yeah.
Yeah.
So like on that case, the confidence that I experience is the confidence of having seen how Cross Catholic works and what it does,
Right.
and who's doing it. The effectiveness. I think what was helpful this past time, especially, is the annual report. And for me, the impact that people's giving has made on how many individuals, I think that's been a helpful thing. And the other piece of it, in terms of humility, is that that it's a way for people to be humble, in the sense of that I can't cure all of the issues. You know, like
Right.
and Cross is for me a very good example of that. That we can't take care of all the hunger in the world. We can't take care of all the other things, and all the other corporal works of mercy is what I kind of focus on. But we can make an impact on people's life in what I typically call a quote unquote American way, that this ingenuity that was developed that got this process going.
No, Bob, you bring up a good point. I've never thought of it in that sense, but the humility piece connected to the way that Cross handles, we're not going to be able to solve everything, but I'm telling you, when you give a gift to Cross like that, that you're really going to be able to solve the people that they're serving's challenges, but we're not solving the whole world challenges. So that's a great, I love that lens on understanding that. And to your point, and that is one of the things that I was hoping we would pull out of this from last week's call, is that the impact that we have should give you confidence in your ask, right? That what happens is, you know, most of the time when people make asks of others, there's a little shyness that comes in, like, oh, it's like you have to be a beggar for Christ. Like, I'm humble. But they're also, if you're not confident enough, then you will look like you're not like really making a difference. And I love, Bob, that you shared that, because the impact does give you that confidence. When you're able to share impact, it translates to confidence inside of, especially inside of the donor's ear, that they want to hear. So thanks for sharing that. Anyone else on what confidence looks like in your preaching? All right, go ahead, Jim.
Unmute. There's a line that I use when I'm describing the brochure. I'll mention the individual 5 things that are listed there for the impact. But I also mentioned the fact that there are suggestions. I said, but we can always think outside the box. I usually mention a meeting. I was privileged to have met Mother Teresa in Chicago when she came to help her sisters open up a mission in one of the worst parts of town. But she had very forcefully said at the end of her talk that if you can't feed 100, feed just 1. And I said, all of us are capable of doing that. I said, but we can also go a little bit further. You know, so there's, for me, there's the humility of somebody like Mother Teresa, but also the confidence that we have that there is an effect, that we're able to feed 100 people by this particular amount of money. But even with that, we can go a little bit further. We can feed them, and we can clothe them, and we can, you know, take care of their needs. Not everybody, but at least it's a start. But Mother Teresa always makes an impact. She still does for me.
I love that. And one of the, sorry about that on the screen, but yeah, no, I love that. And that's a using the stories of others also kind of helps put strength behind our words. So that's just another affirmation of that too. Father Bernard, you had some insight?
Insight, I don't know, Corey. Comment, yes. I think that I agree with Bob and I use that phrase actually, you know, specifically that Christ tells us the poor you will always have with you, but he never said that's okay. And the idea of coming to a parish community because that's what we are commanded to do. This is not an option in Christianity. It's a fundamental call for each of us. And I think it's that confidence that we have to bring, that there is no doubt.
It's true. That's a
as we preach, that this is a command. It's a divine command, pure and simple. How best to do that is hopefully what we can convey, that each of us believes fundamentally that the manner in which Cross Catholic carries out its work is among the most effective ways to do that. And I think that's always, you know, the ability to never, I guess, again, to give no reason why someone might object to the way in which we carry out our work. We know that it works. We know that it's effective. We know that the impact, again, the impact is demonstrable. And therefore, it's that confidence. But and I think the humility, but the humility is also that we can't say, look at all that we've done, because at the same time, we have to say, look at everything that needs to be done. And that's I
like that.
You know, I think that's the
that's the
the balance to the pride, you know, right. Because it always it worries me that if someone were to use, so for example, in our annual report, if you look at the total number of dollars and gifts in kind spent, you know, for the poor, right. It's a fantastic number.
It is.
And it could be a reason why someone says, oh, well, you've done so much, you know, obviously you don't need my help, because that's the humility then that come in and say, you know, this is a drop in the bucket when you look at right. need. But I think those are the, you know, that's the balancing act.
Yeah, that's the dichotomy of it is. And I think that that's what leads to us just being able to share this time, like inside of that balance, in that every week you're going to every mass, you're going into with this balance of having the boldness of like, this is a command, but yet, right, this humility that we're not solving all the world's problems. I love that. Any other thoughts before we jump into the next? Okay. Okay, Charlie, go ahead. You're still muted, Charlie. Hit that mute button, Charlie, if you can. There you go.
Hey, Charlie. Kind of an eclectic thought I'm having as I'm hearing you all is, Corey, you're giving me an opportunity to express it, and that is, in all my years as a priest and giving talks for funds in a parish, a lot of times it falls flat because it's just basically we needed to keep the oil going. We needed to improve the parking lot. And Cross Catholic reaches to the core of what's going on in the world. and may I say it confidently, it is a group that I totally believe in. I love the fact that it's run by laymen and lay women, and I express that at every Mass I go to, because that is a wonderful thing. I'm impressed by the way you respond to things. If I can express this in the best way, when you folks sent me the percentage of what was raised in parishes that I went to, this is odd because it increased my, it helped me say, oh, that's fairly, that percentage looks okay. And I'm going to continue preaching the way I've been preaching. And that's mostly mentioning what we do, what Cross Catholic does in those places. And I think it's working. It's a great organization. As far as the church is going, I am totally convinced that it's a new church that's here. The number of parishes you folks can add them up to I've had in my own experience with priests in Boston. The churches are empty, unbelievably so. One church I went to in Worcester, the pastoral associate was telling me that 8 parishes, I said, boy, this was a good crowd this weekend. No, yeah, 8 parishes had closed and this was the last one. So it was kind of full. So in a way, I'm trying to say, I think Cross Catholic is doing and helping me as an outreach priest. Yeah, we're on the right way. What I've just heard actually from Bernard. Some of the things that of your workshops and stuff have corrected me too, if I will. So I'm not really saying too much, but it's a plus for Cross Catholic. I like what we're doing. I'm a little sad about where the church is going, but I believe in God. I believe in the Holy Spirit, and I believe that it's going in a way that it's meant to go. Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Charlie. Absolutely. All right. So we'll dive into, as we kind of keep going through this, and I'll share the screen to be able to have a little talking points around a few things. What does that look like in your preaching, especially in your asks, right? Understanding and reminding ourselves about your body language, how much that says about you, right? When you are going up to the altar, when you are walking to the ambo, when you are everything that you do, the confidence that you exude helps be able to share that message forward. I remember one time I was just having a really horrid day, and when I was prepping for this webinar, it made me think, like, why put body language in there? Well, anyway, long and short of it is, I was going to go meet a donor, and I was going into the coffee shop, and I got there a little early, which is a surprise in itself. But I just was having a rough day, right? And so I get there, and I didn't know the donor was there. I was meeting this donor for the first time, and I was just kind of like bummed out. I was just kind of like walking around, and the donor's first comment to me was, when he came up and introduced himself, he was like, "Are you all right?" He says, "You kind of sound like you kind of look like you're in the dumps." And I didn't realize I was wearing that on my face so much in that sense. And I know that this isn't some theatrical performance. We're human, but at the same time, knowing that that's such an interesting first cue that you get to be able to have when you're walking down the aisle, the smile, the confidence that you have, kind of being able to put that out there. Obviously, in all this, the selective words we say with confidence, knowing that it is a balance. If we come across too pompous, that selective confidence can turn on us. And then how you hold yourself, obviously, even after Mass. I always laughed at one of my former pastors would always go into the back of church, and he would stand kind of behind a table when he was greeting the parishioners. Kind of, he went to space, and I get it. This was before COVID, so it had nothing to do with COVID. But the fascinating part was that he would always kind of have something in between them, and it was just the way that he held himself was always kind of like a little standoffish. And again, we all have our own personalities, so it's not. I'm not trying to criticize as much as it is those little things that we could sometimes habitually get into really are part of our confidence that that when we're going out there to be able to share cross. And that engagement is an important part, as we talked about in some of our other webinars, words that we use, words of engagement, positivity, and that confidence are those things. Again, this isn't preaching to you as much as reminding you that when you go out there, that's what the confidence comes in all these ways. And so for us, obviously, the same side is of the same coin really is, what does the humility look like in our preaching? What is the humility when we come out there? And I know from Bob, Bernard, y'all shared these things that I think speak right to it, speak right to the heart. Is when we're talking about humility inside of the conversation, we know that we're not solving every problem in the world. We know that we're kind of serving with inside this one niche faithfully into the Lord. And I think that's, I don't think it's far that we could look to Jesus to be able to see how sometimes he spoke right in confidence to someone's sins or to their problems or to their challenges, but yet also in quite humility, the way he prayed, the way he the way he begged his Father for the strength to be able to do this. And like in that same way, I think that is one of the things that the humility for us looks like. But what does it also look like if you're too humble, right? I mean, it looks like it could look like false humility, which is not a good thing to have either, right? And false humility is like, okay, he's talking all this confidence, and then all of a sudden he's pretending to be humble in this way. But specifically in the fundraising side, humility sometimes can work against you, right? If it's not balanced out, in the fact that like you say, well, this isn't that important, and whatever you can give is great, but it's not direct enough. And sometimes humility can be a challenge. The confidence and humility conversation could be a challenge against what our base personality is. And I wanted to be able to address our base personality, because I think that's the bottom line of getting to, to be self-aware enough to know what is the balance that I'm pushed to. Is my nature, is my natural word, like my brothers always say, Corey, quit apologizing for something, and it's like, and that gets into basically your base personality. What they always address is my base personality. I'm trying to get people to connect, to get along. So I start with apologizing. Well, I need to be able to know on the opposite side of that is that I need to be able to be confident in the things that we kind of share. And so for humility, obviously your tone of voice and the way that those go through, your eye contact, humility and the balance of that without eye contact doesn't really allow you to engage in those people. And then obviously in the same piece, where you engage in things and how you say it. So the humility side, balanced with the impact, allows you to be able to then share that what is I feel a super important part of it is really that tone of gratitude and that tone of appreciation for them and kind of why you're here. And I think vulnerability, when you share your own vulnerability, and I know I've seen pretty much all of you now in your preaching and say, when you share your own vulnerability, that is a great sign of humility, right? Because it's not coming to them as if like you have this solution and that they just need to give to you, but it's saying, look, I think that was Jim, when we did our ask call, you started with like your own testimony of your gift, making your gift yourself, and say, I went back and I filled out the envelope in the rectory and I made the gift. That's a sign of humility, right? That you're a servant of this cause also. So that brings to you, what are things that you do? And I know this is counterintuitive because we're talking about humility. So that here you're talking about, like, I'm asking you to tell others how these things, so I get it, but we're all grown adults here. Share ways that you are conscientious to bring humility into your weekly preaching and in your weekly asks. Unmute and pop in, whoever wants to start.
I think this is Bob. I think one of my old teachers, he was old at the time, he probably was 32, said that humility is truth. So in my presentation, I try to be truthful about it. And just so I think telling the story as it is me humility. I just want to flip back to something that you're talking about earlier. We have that in common in terms of confidence and presence and body language. One of the things there's actually a book that's called Between the Altar and the Amble, but it's about that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I totally agree with is just being present with people, and how I maneuver up the aisle and back down the aisle and whatever. And one of the things that I've been finding that's been a kind of a hindrance is a lot of parishes have schedules that do not allow that kind of more casual interaction. Like the place I was at last week, it was like you had 2 minutes. They have a thing about confessions for 15 minutes before Mass, which means that your entire time before Mass is like in the confessional, not with people. And then there are other places that the way you come out to the altar is like out the side there, and back in the side. Right. So not having the opportunity to make decent contact with the hand and with the eye, right, and with conversation it just doesn't feel comfortable. Right. Whatever. Anyway, I do think that my mindset when I'm doing this is that these people are, first of all, worth it, no matter how many there are, sure, or how little there are, and that these people are holy. That they're holy people.
Amen. No, I love that.
And the invitation to live out that holiness. And then the last thing I'll say is that one of the things, a couple of things I've learned from these seminars is to acknowledge people's generosity, in the sense that it's not just what you can give, but as I'm sorry, who I think it was Alan said, that you could stretch it. And I'm feeling more confident in saying that. I've not said, unless I catch it, right, I've not said whatever you can give is okay. I don't say that. I said, your generosity is really important, and we can go beyond. These are suggestions, and
Bob, I just want to affirm you here, and I'm going to share this just to repeat it, because I think it's worth repeating. And I love your vulnerability to share that you were journeying through, hey, whatever you can give, to this confidence in your fundraising to say your generosity is important. We have a critical mission for the poor. That Christ, like Bernard says, like, the poor will always be with us, but that doesn't mean it's okay that they're like, we have to do something about it. Like we're called to be generous in that. And I love that you share that, because that's the journey, I think, through this, of continuing to be confident, but yet this humble call we have to be able to do it. And so I love your vulnerability sharing that, Bob. That's amazing. It really is. That's moving. Because I think for all of us, we all have and that's why I mentioned it, our base personalities. We all have something that's going to be the counterbalance of that in us, that we need to be able to self-examine and think like, well, maybe I'll share this or tweak this part. And that's a great example of that, Bob. So anybody else want to share something like that? Because I think that that's really helpful for y'all all to hear of, like, as you kind of go out there, one of the things, you know, yeah, just hearing it from each other. I don't want to start doing class. Okay, Jim, go ahead, jump in.
I oftentimes, during the ask part of the presentation, is I leave the pulpit and I come down into the center aisle. I can move around as long as I've got a wireless microphone. But I think that personal approach and the closeness of that doesn't separate us by a communion rail or the distance of sanctuary, us up there and you out there. It's more that that we're together in that particular thing. But I also, as far as, it's not even humility, maybe it's just confidence. We had a seminary professor who would always say, the last thing you should do before you go out on the altar is look at yourself in the mirror. He said, you want to be the leader of prayer, not the distractor from prayer. Check your vestments, take off excess jewelry, do what is necessary to not distract the people. And I've always thought of that, and I still look at that mirror just to make sure that I'm not going to distract them from what we are about, not just the message of cross, but the Mass itself. And it has helped me with that personal approach of getting down into the aisle with them. And I oftentimes, you haven't done it in a while, but I utilize, I said, I'm going to be a magician today, and I need an assistant. I said, most magicians have beautiful assistants. And I said, I'd like a beautiful woman to help me. I generally pick a 10-year-old girl or so, you know, who is thrilled to be able to hold something that I have, that I give her, and refer to it at some point during my homily to make it a little more, involved, that the people are involved in what we're doing. They're looking. So that's both, I think, confidence and humility.
I love that you shared that sentiment, because you know, there's something about, you know, it's kind of funny, Jim, you saying that, but it's the old adage of, like, your mom grabbing you and putting you in front of the mirror and be like, tell yourself you love yourself and that you're not going to be your own worst enemy. I mean, it's really base confidence that we do need to remind ourselves of. Think of a position, gentlemen. Y'all are in such a unique spot. You're on stage, right? I mean, you're being pushed out every week. Think how many jobs have the amount of exposure that you do. I mean, it's not an easy gig. I mean, and I say that because so it starts with that self-awareness, and I love Paul and Jim, that you share that, because truly at the end, it's about you pushing yourself out there and looking in the mirror and saying, okay, and it's a faithful reminder of that balance between the confidence and humility. Father Timu, you wanted to share something?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think everything has been very inspiring to me, and I really like what everybody has been sharing. So maybe I have 2 or 3 insights. Maybe every day I grow. So one of the things maybe which makes me to be confident in my preaching is, as you say, the tone of the voice at the very beginning of the homily. So I always begin with, I'm from Africa, I know other languages, so to draw attention, I begin with another greeting in my language. And that shocks people. What is he saying? Then I make interpretation of that greeting. I can say good morning in my own language. How are you in my own language? Then they say, then I teach them on how to reply on my own language. So we become in the same level, drawing the stress and everything, bringing them together. So that has been very helpful. Or sometimes I can begin with a song in my own language and so on and so forth. But another thing, which you also mentioned, or somebody mentioned, at the very beginning, maybe before you begin the mass, some priests, I like to stay at the back of the door, greeting people as they come in, and sometimes I also give them brochures. And I just found people like to be given the brochures on the hand because they really take it seriously sometimes whenever you hand out them just at the beginning. But also, I just found something very helpful. And at the beginning, I couldn't understand it, sharing a story, life-changing story. That's also very important. I just found a very nice story, which also was given by the Cross Catholic. So I can improvise that story and give it to them. And in fact, life-changing story has a great impact to the many parishioners. And also, if you can manage to have some pictures, I remember some pictures, and tell them I have the pictures of the story I've been telling. After the Mass, some people come to us, can I see the pictures, Father, or for the story you've been saying? That has been very impactful. And lastly, this weekend, I just got an advice. When I was distributing the brochures, one of the parishioners told me, Father, how do you find we have a lot of pens downstairs? Can I bring the pens, writing pen, and put on the pews? Because people like to fill in instantly. Then I said, oh, that's a good idea. And I really experienced a great impact. For the first time this weekend, I got 29 brochures. People filled their credit cards numbers on the spot because they had some pens. So I took that idea. Sometimes I can walk with some pen, maybe 20 or somehow. Then I give on the pews. Then after the Mass, I take them out. Perfect. I don't want to talk much and give other to speak.
No, Fatima, I love it. You can keep going. I mean, it's great to hear these stories, and I think that this is the point of these webinars, right? To be able to put you together to hear this. One of the things you said, Fatima, that I love and just wanted to affirm is, in the fundraising conversation, when you're out fundraising, if you're not comfortable in your own skin, nobody's going to want to give to you. Nobody's going to, you are the rep for Cross. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's just affirming. I love that you use your language to be able to be a connector, because it's not that you're not apologizing for your dictation. You're not apologizing for your language. You're not but you're connecting, right? Which shows that you're comfortable in your own skin, which then brings people together, shows our diversity, but yet allows us to be able to have that confidence to be able to ask somebody for a gift, their hard-earned gift, but a confidence to be able to ask that. And so the humility to be able, like, I don't speak like you originally, but yet here I am. And I thought that was great insight.
Yeah, last thing, maybe I also forgot to mention, which I never used, but I found it also very impactful. Whenever we are given an assignment, we are also given a certain assignment sheet. And at the back of the sheet, there is a record showing how many donations that parish has been giving to the Cross Catholic. So sometimes I mention that, and they find it, you tell them that since we started coming to your church, up to now, you have already donated this amount to Cross Catholic Outreach. So some people were not aware how much has been collected. Then when you mention that amount for them, it also gives them courage. But moreover, you need also to read from their brochure, from their bulletins, and get some information what they've also been doing to the parish, because they do not only support Cross Catholic, the parishioners also support their parish, their diocese, and other charities.
Right,
so if
right.
you incorporate that, it's also part of
acknowledging that they give quite generously to their parish and other ministries, like you're saying, is a great sign of humility, that, like, I'm not the only one here that's asking for your money, right? I mean, that's a great sign of humility. Right. Any other thoughts before we jump on to the next slide? Go ahead, Father Pascal.
Yeah, one of the things that I say in terms of humility is that I do recognize people's struggles. That I don't go there just to ask, but I also know that they are going through tough times. And I promise them that I will be praying for them, but at the same time also to encourage them that despite tough times that we can go through, we also have the power to give or to change or to save in other people's lives. Thank you.
That's so, thank you, Father Pascal. You look, that's so powerful to be able to say, you know, and I think we've even addressed this in one of the past webinars. If you know, it's the idea, it's the base idea. I think Bob, you even said that a while back. It's if you need something, let me know. If you have something, please share. You know, and it's that very base idea that brings humility to the table, but also, if I can put words in your mouth, Father Pascal, it's that you're coming to them as a servant, as truly serving their needs and serving their spiritual needs, and that humility endears someone. It allows them to be able to say, yeah, no, I need to be able to share. So that's fantastic. I appreciate that. All right. Okay, let me jump in here. You see here, we're going to go to, I'm going to share my slides and we'll get back and jump into the next piece here. Okay.
Hello, Corey. Hello,
yes,
Corey.
Sir. Yeah, Father
I have a doctor's appointment just at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, go jump in.
Okay, right.
We'll keep you in prayer. Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday.
Yes, indeed.
At Florida. All right. God bless
you.
God bless you. And my greetings to everyone. God bless you all.
So we talked about this in a little bit, but I just want to make sure we addressed it specifically about commanding the audience. You know, this is going to sound like a theatrical insight, but bear with me. It's not just meant to be able to talk about. But you know, they always say that whenever a performer, entertainer, somebody that's the crowd's looking at, commanding the audience, what does that look like? It's allowing them, almost in the same way that Father Jim said, look, you look in the mirror and say, don't distract them from the Lord. But knowing that a big piece of the conversation, oh, my light went out. Hold on one second, you guys, it's so goofy. Okay, so knowing that one key component of that is when you command in the audience, there's really one element that is important about it. If you ever, you know, if you've ever been involved in theater, or if you've ever been involved in anything where basically the audience is kind of looking at you, and regardless, when I know it's celebrating Mass, but regardless, people are looking at you, and knowing that in commanding the audience, it is an act of confidence and humility to be able to get them to journey with you. But I think one of the things that I wanted to address, or at least talk about, and then we'll, you know, we'll keep moving along here. But is when you get into a scenario and you're sharing, especially with a group, it's hard to be able to like kind of look around, to be able to make eye contact with everybody. But I think one of the important parts of specifically in the ask part of your homily is to be able, when you're making that ask and you're saying, hey, look, here's some things, and you're specifically talking about cross, that you're doing that in a way that allows you to be able to share specifically about your lens, so that when you command the audiences, you're not just overconfident, you're not just super humble, but you're being able to understand that there's certain cues that are going on that are inside, that could be inside the church, so that when you're talking. So for example, I noticed in a couple of your homilies, like the brochures, you say, okay, look in the look in the pew around you. Well, instead of, and then you say, okay, grab a brochure and pass it to the next person in the pew. If you say, as you kind of going through this, well, you wouldn't start talking as they're passing a brochure, pausing and being able to know that like your cadence and the way that you command the audience is done in a way that allows you to be able to kind of not only exude confidence in that, but allows you to be able to feel that you're pausing, the way you hold yourself, the way you speak to them is the way that they're going to be kind of almost entrusted to you in this process of asking for this gift. But I think one of the interesting things about this, when you talk about commanding an audience or being there with individuals, is being able to see this and the relationship with money. So how do we balance confidence and humility when the idea here is that they have this money and they're making this gift? And I heard a few of you say this, and I just wanted to, it's really one of our lighter points of this webinar, but I think it's important that money oftentimes comes with this idea of power, right? And so when you have power, and it does have power, sometimes we can give too much power to those with a lot of money, but yet at the same time we're fundraising. And how do we navigate that balance of the confidence of asking someone to be able to say, hey, look, for those that can make the sacrifice, your gift can make this impact, and we use impact to be able to do that. But I think you need to, I think part of this is being able to understand that when you're asking specifically for this and you're commanding the audience, that you're the trusted figure here. And so little things that you say, and that's part of the reason why when Bob said this earlier, that I really thought it was great, is that because he alluded to this, the point that I was wanting to make in this slide, is that it's not just this, hey, give what you can, because the idea with money there gets a little funny, right? It's like, okay, give you what you can. But the confidence around asking for money means that you have to command the audience. You have to be able to be confident to be able to say, and with your gift, we will truly care for this and we will be good stewards of this. And the impact of it, all those things come with the same idea that you can't just say, hey, possibly show what you have, and then the impact happens. You have to be confident, command the audience, but knowing that the money is involved in this is to be able to say, we diffuse the money part of the conversation and commanding the audience with impact and with stewarding the gifts. And I only share this because I think it's for each of you. When you go into this process, thinking yourself of like, when I'm going to make an ask, that you have to be confident, and then at the same side, very shortly after, to be humble and to be able to say, we're going to care for this truly. But that there's a power dynamic here that you just have to be aware of, that you want to make sure that doesn't come across in any way. And so that's why continuing to work and refine the craft of your ask truly comes in a way that we then just come to the people, and that they know that somebody, if they were summarizing your preaching after, and you say, you know what, he was confident, but yet I knew he was a beggar for Christ. And I think that is the balance, that when we would come out of this at the very end, you would say, you know what, he did ask me for money and he did it confidently, but you know what, he did it for Christ only. And I think that that's the kind of the motivation and the connection we want to be able to leave at this, that every time after the end of Mass, that you're able to say, you know what, I think I pulled that off. I was able to pull that off. And it is an art form to be able to pull this idea off, is that we have an influence of money. We have, few of y'all said this, you going into weird communities sometimes, odd, I should say, not weird. You going into odd communities where there's, I guess you could say weird sometimes, but anyway, but you go into spots sometimes that are, you don't know what the tone of how the priest preaches. It's interesting. You could even say this about one of our parishes here, like, oh, you could say the name of the parish and somebody says, oh, they always ask for money. And so what if you landed in that parish? So everything that you do, the way that you beg for Christ, if you will, is going to be an impactful piece of this. And I think something for all of us just to continue to be reminded, refining the craft. And then as we go, we need to be able to remember that we're beggars and our sisters. This is the throwback to our last one. The thing that reminds us that we're beggars is truly our sisters. Remember what those were? gratitude, and generosity. And so the Sisters of Gratitude and Generosity continue to be able to reinforce the gratitude, continue to be able to know that your refinement and craft means that we're forever evolving what we share in our story and that story of cross. And so when you go through that lens and you push yourself through these things, there's going to be good days and bad days, but always reminding yourself, like Jim said, look in the mirror, pull yourself, knowing that we all have kind of the gifts to be able to kind of to then push out. That's some of the main content. I wanted to be able to open up for conversations in that balance. I know some people had to pop off early. In refining the craft, any thoughts or insights on how you're going to be able to take this with you, share your takeaways, and kind of be able to share what we have to take with us for this coming weekend. Father Bernard?
I have a question, actually.
Sure.
And the question is specifically about the word beggar. For a long time, I used that word. I come to you today, not for me, but as a beggar on behalf of the poor. And then I was thinking about it. I mean, is that the best word to use? Does it have negative connotations? I mean, I realize that, depending on the audience and everything, but I've avoided using the word to beg. And I'm wondering if others have reactions.
I'd love to hear feedback, because I think there's so many nuances. The word is a loaded word, so let's just acknowledge that. I mean, it's in the spiritual sense, it's one way. For grace, it's almost an over humility, like almost this. Could it be false humility? Kind of going back to that point.
Yeah, I mean, my hesitation is that it isn't the confidence that I should be here asking you for this.
Right.
So
it's good. I'd love to break that open. Father Jim, you're going to share something?
I was just going to use the line I use quite frequently. I'm not too proud to beg for the Lord. So there is that confidence in what I'm doing, but also a humility, in the ask, that I will continue, in a sense, to not debase myself, by begging for your money, but being part of it. I'm not too proud to beg. And I'm begging you today on behalf of the Lord's poor. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
No, it's really good. Steve, go ahead, jump in.
Father Jim, I hope you're feeling well.
Feeling better, thank you.
With regard to both your comments, I always say I come in the spirit of St. Francis of Assisi, and that really connects with them. He is a saint on your lawn, and they get the idea that, we beg not for ourselves, but for the less fortunate.
Beautiful.
If Father Steve, did you want to pop in? You want to unmute and share? You're muted though right now, Steve. I think we're getting there. While he's doing that, and he could take my spot, Father Bernard, I think one of the things I'll share with this, interesting enough, like when I go meet with donors, I don't go to them and say, I'm begging you, right? And so I think one of the fascinating parts of this is the element of the preaching and asking is a unique piece, right? And Well, I'll pause that thought because we have Steve. Go ahead, Paul.
No, I think all the comments have been very helpful. I think the nexus between confidence and humility is showing great respect for not only our position of asking and being there, but also the congregation. So I often will use the term, I am honored to be here. I'm honored that your pastor has asked me to be here this weekend, to give honor and respect to the congregation, that you're not just there seeing them as an ATM machine,
right?
Begging again. I agree. I have really mixed feelings about using that term beggar. And I think we want to invite them into the opportunity of giving. And this is a very respectful opportunity. The reality is so many parishes, so many cities have beggars on the corners. And it's a mixed metaphor for, to use, I think. So you said it well, that every congregation you have to assess the terms that you use. But I think showing respect and showing honor, and again, honoring the pastor and how the pastor is inviting them and us together to build the body of Christ and build bridges. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's great affirmation, Steve. And Father Bernard, going back to your point, I do think this is great to unpack, because I think one of the things that I would say is in the regular fundraising world, the reason why I'm not saying that the word beggar is really what I have to offer you. And I'm going back to affirm Steve's word that he said is an invitation to fullness, an invitation to grace. It's not just you giving me something, it's something that is there for your offer. And it's an invitation into this beautiful relationship between gift and giver, between this idea that there's grace in being generous. And so those are the things that I think continue to be able to have part of this conversation, that it doesn't necessarily line up in its word, but yet it could be used if it's in the proper context or kind of massaged out. But I would agree, especially now, especially if you go into big cities, and the negative connotation sometimes is a little weird. But I'm glad you brought that to attention so that we could talk about it. Paul Dobson?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody. I truly enjoyed listening, but I have an appointment in a few minutes, and it's going to take me a while to get there. So thank you all very much, and have a great day.
Absolutely, Paul Dobson. Thanks for being on. Before we wrap up, any other thoughts on that?
John Phelps.
Yes.
Sorry, John. Sorry.
Yeah. I think I'm sensitive. I love the fact that we're asking the question on beggar. I work in public high schools among the poor during the week, and the ones that are begging are not seen as being sincere all the time. And so I don't even think that word. I think the word invest. And the thing I love about Cross Catholic is that we're using our funds to invest in the people for they themselves to be able to bridge themselves out of poverty, to be able to actually make a difference. And we're not doing it for them. We're actually training them for themselves. And I've used the pandemic. Do you realize we worked 2 years when we couldn't reach anybody? All we did was give to the people we've trained what they needed to take care of themselves. And kind of there's something about equity and dignity about that. So I find myself thinking that way. I find myself in public high schools talking that way. And so that's what I'm wired to do.
No, that's great affirmation, and I would agree. I think the idea here is just as you're saying, that the investment into the people, but also this idea that there's this invitation, right? And it comes as a mutual relationship that we're calling them, and they're bringing, so that we're bringing them an opportunity, but that it's this investment. And again, just as a reminder, part of that, and it's not apologizing for the word. I know that those, the way that we kind of framed this was not necessarily the way that you kind of go out to talk about it, but definitely that just remind ourselves of the humility that comes when we are going to someone in that sense, and the humility that we bring balanced with the confidence of that investment, the confidence of that invitation that Christ commands us. So it's great. Any thoughts before we wrap? Just wanted to thank you all for participating. This was obviously one of our better ones where we kind of just jumped in, and this is what we're trying to seek to be able to really build, is for you to jump on once a month for an hour, hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes to be able to share, get some insight, and feel like we could connect, ask how Jim's doing or anybody else is doing, you know what I mean? Like that's community. And so thanks for helping build the community today by sharing your own insights and words. And welcome to the new guys. We look forward, Father Bozeman, and did we lose everybody else? Yeah. And for my little screen shrunk. But anyway, for all the new guys, thank y'all for being on. And Ashton, any parting words?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you everyone for joining today. We're so happy to have these webinars. I do want to remind you that I had sent out a survey. We would love and really appreciate feedback on. I sent it to your Catholic email, as a link to your personal email as well. If you haven't seen and you would like to do it, please reach out to me. If not, we would really love and appreciate your feedback. So just a reminder to get that done this week if you are able to. Thanks so much.
And thanks to all the Cross Catholic team, the staff. They're always kind of looking, working to try to build all this work up. So kudos to everybody that was on. Valerie, Joanne, I know Sandy was on. So all right, guys, much love. Appreciate it. Y'all have a great week.
Lori, on behalf of all of the OPs, thank you. Thank you for sharing your expertise, for your vision of church, and for all of the things that you bring to us to help make us better preachers. So we thank you for this year together.
That means a lot.
Thank you, Corey. Very well.
Y'all have a blessed one. Take it easy.
Bravo Zulu.
Namaste.